This week our topic is the postmodern gangster. Now, one thing that made the postmodern gangster possible is the abandonment of the Hollywood production code, which you've already talked about to a certain extent. So that was removed in 1968 and replaced by the modern rating system that we more or less have today. And once those constraints were gone, we could actually look at the gangster in a very different way. One of the main things is we get an even-handed portrayal of the gangster. He doesn't have to be seen as necessarily a terrible person who's bad for society. We can actually start rooting for him. So one of the best early examples of this is The Godfather from 1972. And in this film, we're not looking at the standard rise and fall of the gangster the way we normally see with films like Scarface, where he starts at the bottom, makes it almost the way to the top before getting knocked down. In this case, our main gangster, Don Corleone, he is already at the top. He's made it there. But now he has to try to stay alive while he's there and come up with a plan to actually keep his businesses going, keep his family safe, and things like that. A lot of really human concerns that you normally didn't see in the earlier gangster films. And in this particular film, Don Corleone, Vito Corleone, dies, which I don't want to spoil that for everybody, but usually most people have seen The Godfather. But he dies a natural death in this film, which is something that's almost unheard of. A very peaceful death in his garden with his grandson. And in this film, often it's the police and the other authorities who are portrayed as the real villains and the real criminals in this, while the Corleone family is actually seen as almost law-abiding in certain respects, except for the fact that they kill people. But it almost seems like something necessary. Another thing we start to see in the postmodern gangster films are what we refer to as new school gangsters. And a lot of times, if you're watching something like The Sopranos, some of the gangsters refer to older gangsters as being old school and newer guys as being new school. So the new school guys still use violence if they have to, but ultimately they're businessmen. And some of the businesses they get involved in are different from what the old school guys will do. So a lot of the old school gangsters, would draw the line at drugs, and this is something that's dealt with explicitly in The Godfather. The new school guys, they'll move whatever they have to, whether it's booze, drugs, hookers, stolen goods. They have no problem as long as they can make money with it. They're also looking for long-term investments and also trying to keep a law-abiding public face. So rather than looking like one of the old-school gangsters who look like criminals, they try to actually blend in. And that's what we end up seeing in the film for this week, which is Goodfellas from 1990, directed by Martin Scorsese. Arguably his best film, or at least one of them. And based on a true story with a few fibs here and there. Now in this film we even go beyond what we get in The Godfather. Now we get to follow the gangster from when he's a kid to when he actually goes through his entire life. And we get to really identify with him, and he makes it sound like a fun ride, and you're there to be with him as he does it. It's seems very enjoyable in some cases. Some of the other scrapes he gets into aren't quite as fun, and maybe you don't want to identify with him quite as much at those times. He's also more or less integrated within his community. So some people might know he's a gangster, but for the most part, he looks like everybody else in suburban New Jersey here. And in some cases, he seems like a normal businessman, just that his business is not quite the same as what other business people might be doing. He carries a gun, things like that. And as actually said in the film, he seems like he's a little bit more enterprising, like he's more of an entrepreneur because he risks more, not just his business, but also his life, his family, his safety, things like that. Now, this film was set in what we tend to think of as the organized crime capital of the Western world, so New York City and New Jersey. And, Sopranos has actually gone even further. It actually kind of took a cue from Goodfellas and kind of expanded the canvas out quite a bit. And what's great about this film is we get to cover a long enough span of time to see the old school gangsters and how they were, and the new school guys. So we start in the 1950s and move all the way into the 1980s and see how organized crime changes as time goes on. So very good history lesson to go along with. Enjoy, and good luck.